Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. President Trump hosts the leaders of several Central Asian nations at the White House. The administration says the meeting signals positive developments for both the U.S. and the world.
President Trump defending his tariff threats on Beijing as a national security lifeline 1 day after the Supreme Court heard arguments over his sweeping tariffs.
Vice President J.D. Vance has some strong words for a federal judge following a major ruling on SNAP funding.
And a 15th vote to reopen the government expected today as a new deal shapes up, but many Democrats are still not satisfied with Republicans' offer. Are there enough willing to break ranks to turn the government lights on?
Several people are ill after a suspicious package is opened at Joint Base Andrews. What we know about the incident so far.
And real wellness doesn't come from detoxing in January. A functional medicine doctor says setting yourself up for success this holiday season starts here and now in November.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today's Friday, November 7th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, President Trump deepening ties with Central Asia.
Yeah, he announced a new trade deal and an expansion of the Abraham Accords with Israel during a meeting with the region's leaders at the White House last night. Here's more on that.
A high-level gathering at the White House yesterday. President Trump welcoming the leaders of 5 Central Asian nations for talks focused on trade, energy, and critical minerals as the U.S. competes with Russia and China in the region. The big headline, Kazakhstan joining the Abraham Accords, expanding the Middle East peace framework launched during Trump's first term.
I'm also delighted to report that Kazakhstan has officially agreed, and that's official now, as of about 15 minutes ago. A tremendous country with a tremendous leader has officially joined the Abraham Accords.
The move marks the first addition to the Accords since Trump returned to office and extends the pact's reach into Central Asia. Kazakhstan will join the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, though it has had full diplomatic relations with Israel since 1992. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who joined the talks, described the expanded Abraham Accords as reshaping economic alliances beyond just Israel.
It's not just with Israel, it's with all the other countries that are part of the accord. You're now creating a partnership that brings special and unique economic development on all sorts of issues that they can work on together.
Trump also touted new trade and investment deals. On Truth Social, the president announced Uzbekistan would be purchasing and investing almost $35 billion in the U.S., growing to more than $100 billion over the next 10 years, focusing on minerals, aviation, auto parts, and other technology. Kazakhstan's president also announced trade agreements between American and Kazakh companies worth billions.
During my visit alone, our businesses are concluding deals worth over $17 billion, paving the way even greater B2B partnership.
Trump used the moment to contrast his foreign policy with that of his predecessors, saying Central Asia has been overlooked for too long.
Sadly, previous American presidents neglected this region completely. It's an unbelievable region, and by the way, it happens to be an extremely wealthy region too. But we are fixing that mistake, and I'm committed to making America's partnership with each of these countries stronger than ever before.
Central Asian countries are rich in minerals and may offer an alternative to China for sourcing critical minerals. Kazakhstan's president praised Trump's role in what he called a new era of cooperation.
You are the great leader, statesman, sent by heaven to bring common sense and traditions that we all share and value back into the United States policy.
Trump framed the summit as part of a broader foreign policy agenda centered on peace through strength.
I want peace through strength, but we want peace all over the world, and we're very close to getting it.
Trump also said that within a year and a half, U.S. dependence on China for minerals will no longer be an issue.
And President Trump, following Supreme Court arguments on his sweeping global tariffs, is doubling down, labeling the case the most important in the history of our country, and spotlighting his tariff threats against Beijing as a national security lifeline that forced China's Xi Jinping to the bargaining table.
Yeah, and the president was announcing fresh deals to expand coverage and reduce prices of weight loss drugs. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu reports from the White House.
President Trump is saying that he's going to need to come up with a Game 2 plan if the Supreme Court does not rule in favor of the legality of his global tariffs. However, the president also adds that he does not want to discuss this possibility right now, saying that he's hopeful after Treasury Secretary Bessent went to the oral argument. And the president says that it will be, quote, devastating if he loses this ruling, calling the case life or death for the U.S. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
I think it's the most important case maybe in the history of our country.
President Trump emphasizes the relationship between economic strength and national security.
So much evolves around tariffs as a defensive mechanism for our country, as national security for our countries.
Repeatedly citing his recent use of 100% tariff threats levied against Beijing as instrumental in getting Xi Jinping to ease rare earth export controls.
If you look at China, by putting a large 100% tariff over and above the tariffs they already paid, they came to the table with the 100%. I was able to do it instantaneously when we were threatened by the rare earths. Yes, it was a matter of seconds. We would have had not nearly the defense that we had. It would be somewhat catastrophic for our country.
Meanwhile, President Trump unveils a deal to lower costs on obesity drugs Zepbound and Wegovy.
The American public, because of this agreement, will lose 125 million pounds by this time next year. It is going to have dramatic effects on human health in this country.
The deal with the drug companies Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly also broadens the coverage of the drugs for those on Medicare and Medicaid.
Co-pays for Medicare patients will be as low as $50. Now you're talking about from $1,350 to $50. This is tremendous news for the American seniors.
Thanks to Mari for that report. And the Trump administration is launching a pilot program to lower Medicaid drug costs by matching prices to those in other developed nations. We've been hearing a lot about that recently. Now, this plan, called Generous, will begin in 2026 and run through 2030.
Yeah, talking about this most favored nation concept where you don't pay more than anywhere else in the world. You don't get penalized because you live here. And it's voluntary both for the states and the drug manufacturers under this program. Manufacturers provide the rebates to the states to ensure medications at rates similar to those, as we were just saying, in countries like Canada and the UK and Japan.
Meanwhile, President Trump is sitting down with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban at the White House today. The two leaders are expected to talk about Russian oil and plans to strengthen economic ties. This will be their first bilateral meeting since Trump returned to office in January. Trump has pressed European nations to stop buying Russian energy, to cut off funding for Moscow's war in Ukraine. Hungary, which has kept Russian oil and gas flowing since the war began, is seeking exemptions from U.S. energy sanctions. Ahead of the talks, Orban, a strong ally of Trump, told Hungarian media that he expects friendly negotiations despite the high stakes. The White House says the leaders also plan to expand economic cooperation, hinting at new trade deals.
And joining us now live to discuss Hungary's Prime Minister's visit from Viktor Orban to the White House is Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gov't. He's a geopolitical strategist as well as a former Black Hawk helicopter pilot and a battalion commander with the U.S. Army. Thanks for joining us this morning, Darren. It's good to see you now. Hungary's Orban is in the rare position, right? He enjoys strong relationships with both Trump and with Putin. So, what are you expecting from today's meeting?
Hey, good morning, Carrie. Yeah, I think in the end, what you're going to find are comments that are along the lines of it was a very productive discussion and it was a positive event. And that's going to be like the entry level comments. But what you're going to really want to be hearing is it's all about the oil when it comes to Hungary, because they're going to want to continue access to it from Russia because that's the only place they get it from. They have one pipeline going into Hungary. They have no access to sea and seaports to get it from anywhere else. And so in some ways, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and they have to try to keep friendships on both sides. That's a common Eastern European problem, is trying to maintain friendly relationships, both East and West. And the history in Eastern Europe is pretty significant when it comes to that. So I don't expect you're going to find anything other than friendly comments about the entire discussion today. And he's going to want to be able to walk away and go home to Hungary and say that Trump was very receptive to him being able to bypass some of the rules against importing Russian oil because, frankly, they don't get it from anywhere else anyways.
Yeah, when Trump had kind of laid down the gauntlet, he didn't call out France and Spain specifically, but they were also buying Russian oil products. And they have many other options. Poland, though, is saying Hungary could get oil from a southern corridor. It probably would cost them more, and they just choose not to. So, can you have your cake and eat it here, too? Obviously, Orban wants to go back, keeping the relations with Trump, but getting this carve out. Can you be half pregnant, I guess?
Last I checked, that was kind of difficult. I think ultimately what he's trying to do is he's trying to avoid having to beg from friends in order to get that southern corridor or access via other means, and just be able to continue the way he's doing it now. You can argue that whether that's good or bad or otherwise, but this is just one example of why Hungary is so unique in the fact that it's hard to figure out Orban. If you're looking for things that are anti-freedom, anti-democracy, you're going to have plenty there to look at. But if you're also looking for things that are more pro-freedom and pro-democracy and immigration controls and various things like that, you're going to find that too. So haters on both sides are going to find plenty. Lovers on both sides are going to find plenty as well. But what he's really coming here to do is to try to make sure that the Hungarian economy is able to be kept alive and be able to import that oil from Russia, because that's the road ahead that he feels like he needs to pave, and that's the biggest one.
Yeah, just in our last hour, we had Brendan Weichert on. He was talking about some of the bad pasts in Syria and their current leader, but that Trump is looking forward and trying to create new alliances that advance his agenda for peace as well as for decoupling from China with reliance on things like rare earths. Hungary, to that point, has had historically a very rocky past with Russia. Can you explore that and how Orban has sort of gotten close to Putin?
Well, Orban's gotten close to Putin out of necessity, and many nations in Eastern Europe tend to do that. Again, this is the historical problem of being, frankly, the lamb that constantly gets run over when West invades East or East invades West. And that's been going on for many years. We're talking back to the Napoleonic era and others. So that's really what Orban is in, and many others are in as well. So any Eastern European nation is going to have rocky relationships with Western Europe and Moscow in what some would call Eastern Europe, because they consider Moscow itself part of Eastern Europe in some ways too. So they're trying to, just in Hungary did this too, they're trying to maintain friendships with Moscow, regardless of who's in charge there, in order to try to maintain somewhat of a semblance of friendliness, regardless of what's going on in the world, while also knowing that in many cases, the economy that they need is Western Europe. Just like Russia needs access to Western Europe to sell energy there, Western Europe needs to be able to buy the energy, well, for now, from Russia, although we prefer they buy it from us. That's the history of every president and prime minister in Eastern Europe, is a balancing act between two powerful foes, and they're the ones stuck in the middle.
Yeah, you can almost see how making the U.S. less of an oil producer in the previous administrations really weakened our hand in these global interconnected discussions. When you look at India as part of BRICS, similar situation to Hungary that you're just describing. How has ramping up oil production kind of changed Trump's hand in these negotiations and in these dealings?
Yeah. National security is energy security these days, and that's what it's all about. And we as America have the capacity to be energy independent of all nations and to be a primary exporter on a global scale, and should continue to pursue that. Our hands have been tied by ourselves largely, unfortunately, through international alliances of no value, through overregulation in many ways across the country here. And to provide an example of what could be done if we wanted to, there's enough coal in Montana and Wyoming, in places that I know where it's at, to power the energy industry in America for well over 250 years, produce enough electricity to be more than compensating for any losses anywhere else. But we tie our own hands in getting access to it through all these different regulations. If we can free up the energy industry to not only take care of ourselves and be an exporter, we actually change the entire global security dynamic in our relationship with numerous nations and regions.
Yes, that beautiful clean coal up in Montana. I'd like to see it up close in the near future. And hopefully these meetings that you're discussing, maybe Turkey as well as Hungary, can be the way that we can get this thaw with Putin that we're all hoping for. Really appreciate you joining us this morning. Colonel Darren Gov't, great to see you.
You too. Thanks, Kerry.
And a major ruling on SNAP funding. A federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to pay the approximately $9 billion to fully fund food stamps for November. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the decision and the Trump administration's reaction.
Rhode Island Judge John McConnell Jr. says the Department of Agriculture must pay states the money by today. It will go to approximately 42 million recipients of SNAP. McConnell said, "People have gone without for too long. Not making payments to them for even another day is simply unacceptable." USDA officials had declined to fund SNAP amid the government shutdown, arguing that they could not use emergency funding or revenue from tariffs. The administration had only partially funded the program, citing limits on contingency funds and reluctance to tap tariff revenue. But McConnell said that decision violated his earlier order and caused irreparable harm. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded that the administration has been complying, saying the president is using emergency funds meant for war and catastrophes because of the ongoing government shutdown. Vice President J.D. Vance criticized the ruling, calling it absurd.
Because you have a federal judge effectively telling us what we have to do in the midst of a Democrat government shutdown.
Vance blamed the Democrats and called on them to open the government.
Then we can fund SNAP, and we can also do a lot of other good things for the American people. But in the midst of a shutdown, we can't have a federal court telling the president how he has to triage the situation.
The judge's order was in response to a challenge from cities and nonprofits, complaining the administration was only offering to cover 65% of the maximum benefit. Lawyers for the Trump administration filed a motion to appeal shortly after the judge's ruling. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
2 steps forward and 1 step back. A deal to reopen the government was looking hopeful, but now it's unclear where support stands. Are there enough Democrats willing to break ranks to turn the lights back on today? NTD's Melina Weiskup has that report.
Senators expected to meet this afternoon for a 15th vote on reopening the government. Leadership is eyeing a mini package that would fully fund parts of the government while patching funds for the rest until January, plus a promised Obamacare vote. Senate Leader John Thune visibly heated on the floor after reports that this offer was not enough to satisfy Democrats.
Will the far left not be satisfied until federal workers and military families are getting their Thanksgiving dinner from a food bank? Because that's where we're headed.
A key Democrat negotiator told reporters he doesn't expect the shutdown to end soon because they, quote, have to make sure we get a deal that we can get broad support for.
Because we were hearing that there were some common sense centrist Democrats who were talking to Republicans, but what I understand is that Chuck Schumer has pulled them back from that, and that they're being instructed and told they can't go there. So that's a great disappointment, and
Democrat leadership has not softened on demands for Republicans to sign off on a definite deal to extend Obamacare subsidies.
Well, I have good news for the president. Meet with Democrats, reopen the government, fix the ACA crisis. That's the best way to put this crisis behind us.
It's unclear what Republicans plan to do if today's vote fails again. If senators don't see any hope for a deal coming to fruition, they could leave Washington for the next week. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And as the government shutdown continues, Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago are among the 40 airports that will be affected during a reduction in flights starting today.
Yeah, it's crazy. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said that if air traffic controllers continue to be unpaid, the holiday travel with Thanksgiving just 3 weeks away now could get very rough. NTD's correspondent Jason Blair brings us more.
Starting Friday, 40 airports will be affected by a 10% reduction in flights. Most major airports made the list, including here at Reagan Washington National. Some others include Los Angeles International, John F. Kennedy International in New York, Denver International in Colorado, Harry Reid International in Las Vegas, Chicago O'Hare in Illinois, and Dallas-Fort Worth in Texas. The FAA has already been delaying flights at times when airports or other FAA facilities are short on controllers. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy tells Fox and Friends that after looking at the data, the department decided that a reduction in flights would be best.
Taking 10% of the flights out will reduce that pressure, which is what we want to do. Now, does that mean there's going to be no delays? No, Brian, there's potentially still going to be delays.
Duffy says that air traffic controllers are not getting paid and, quote, they've all told me it's really hard. He says that if things don't change with the shutdown, there could be travel disruption moving into the holidays.
And as we come into Thanksgiving, if we're still in the shutdown posture, it's going to be rough out there, really rough.
Some airlines have said that they will be working to try to minimize traveler impact. United Airlines said that it would focus the cuts on smaller regional routes that use smaller planes. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Welcome back. Just in this morning, Republican Representative Elise Stefanik announced she's running for governor of New York.
That's right. She'd been teasing her run for governor for months, and currently she represents a solid red congressional district in upstate New York.
Although a Republican candidate faces long odds of winning a governor's race in New York, Stefanik's campaign will bring solid fundraising and deep ties to Trump's White House.
Yeah, of course, you have to presume this timing right off the back of Mamdani's win in New York City. And incumbent Democrat Governor Kathy Hochul, who had endorsed Mamdani, she's facing a contested primary herself with Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado running against her.
We'll be keeping you updated there. Yeah. Next, War Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. carried out another lethal strike on a drug smuggling vessel in the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's right. Hegseth said yesterday that 3 people he described as narco-terrorists were targeted.
Yeah. The Pentagon says no U.S. forces were harmed in the operation. This is the 17th reported strike against drug smuggling vessels since September.
Hegseth warned the strikes will continue until illegal drugs stop flowing into the U.S. In a post on X, the secretary wrote, "If you want to stay alive, stop trafficking drugs." Strong words from him. And several people have fallen ill after a suspicious package was opened at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. A spokesperson told Axios News several people were treated by medics yesterday, and they were later released in stable condition. He said that as a precaution, base officials evacuated 2 buildings and put a cordon around the area. They say there are no immediate threats, and normal operations have since resumed. Authorities have opened an investigation into this incident.
And a federal judge has restricted federal agents in Chicago from using tear gas and other anti-riot measures unless there's an immediate threat. District Judge Sarah Ellis said video evidence contradicted government accounts of violence at protests, calling claims of widespread unrest untrue. The Department of Homeland Security criticized the decision as an extreme act by an activist judge, warning it could endanger law enforcement officers. Judge Ellis's injunction bars agents from using items such as tear gas and pepper balls unless such force is objectively necessary to prevent an immediate threat. It also bars agents from using physical force, including shoving, against protesters and journalists, and requires agents to give 2 verbal warnings before using riot weapon control weapons. The government plans to appeal the ruling, which stems from ongoing clashes over immigration enforcement operations in Chicago. And the Department of Homeland Security says it's getting record numbers of applications. The department says more than 35,000 Americans have applied to join its new Homeland Defender program, which is the most in U.S. citizenship and immigration services history. The DHS launched the campaign on social media in late September to recruit people who will process immigration applications.
That's right. Yeah, the agency's saying that the new hires can receive a signing bonus of up to $50,000 with no college degree required, and options available for remote work as well. Sounds like a pretty good gig. The Immigration Services Director says the campaign has been a tremendous success and has resonated with the American people.
Next, the community in Louisville is grieving after this week's deadly UPS cargo plane crash that killed at least 13 people.
Yeah, this is a very difficult story. Mourners gathered yesterday for a candlelight vigil to honor the victims and those that are still affected by the tragedy.
I pray that you would bring peace to the hearts that are here and help us to be gathered around our need for you.
This was a hard day. This has been a really a tough couple of days for us at the IPA, for the community of Louisville, a tight-knit community, for this tragedy that happened really before our very eyes.
When we saw the firefighters walking towards bodies that were still on the ground with the stretchers, it was too painful for me to watch. That was the moment that I had to turn away. Yet I know that the pain that I felt in that moment is nothing compared to what the pain of the families are feeling right now, who are searching for answers.
Tuesday's disaster killed all 3 pilots on board and at least 10 people on the ground when the aircraft burst into flames shortly after takeoff and sparked a large fire that consumed nearby buildings.
Yeah, as you can see from that footage, the investigators said that a large plume of fire erupted around the aircraft's left wing and one of its engines detached. The National Transportation Safety Board is now examining this 34-year-old cargo jet's maintenance records, including recent repairs that were carried out in Texas. And the Supreme Court majority yesterday has allowed the Trump administration to block transgender and non-binary identifying Americans from selecting an X mark on their gender marker for their passport. The court lifted a lower court's block on the Trump administration's policy. The lower court had temporarily blocked the policy, and an appeals court declined to overturn the block. The highest court said in a short order that, quote, displaying passport holders' sex at birth no more offends equal protection principles than displaying their country of birth. However, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and Justice Elaine Kagan all dissented from this decision.
Meanwhile, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has canceled a lower court's block on a Texas law that had banned drag performances in the presence of children. The case was sent back to the lower courts for further review. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on Thursday canceled a lower court ruling that blocked a Texas bill from banning drag performances for children. A panel of 3 judges ordered a narrower review of the bill and found that only one of the plaintiffs had standing to challenge it. The San Antonio-based 360 Queen Entertainment had standing because it conducted performances that, quote, exaggerated sexual characteristics, which likely fell under the statute in question. The bill, called Senate Bill 12, was signed by Governor Greg Abbott in 2023. It makes it a crime to host or perform a sexually oriented performance in public or in the presence of minors. A lower court struck down the bill on grounds that it violated free speech rights. The Fifth Circuit majority disagreed and stated that most of the plaintiffs' conduct didn't fall within the constraints that the bill intended. For example, it said a vendor handing out condoms is not a sexual performance. The panel dismissed the claims of several plaintiffs and ordered that only the Attorney General could be sued by the remaining plaintiff. Then it sent the case back to the lower court to apply a different test to assess whether or not the bill violates the First Amendment. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
After decades in Congress, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced she will retire in 2027.
Yeah, that's right. While Democrats hail her legacy, President Trump says she's done great damage to the country. NTD's Iris Tao takes a closer look at the milestones and controversies that define Pelosi's career.
I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. Capping a career at 20 terms, 85-year-old former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi announces she will not seek re-election in 2027. Pelosi's departure will mark the end of an era in Congress. She's first elected in 1987, and in 2007, she became the first female Speaker of the House.
Today, we have broken the marble ceiling.
As Speaker and House Democrats leader, Pelosi was known for her ability to unite conflicting factions of Democrats to pass legislation, including stimulus bills and the Affordable Care Act. She also has a long history of calling out the Chinese Communist Party over its human rights abuses, whether by unveiling a banner on Tiananmen Square 2 years after the regime's 1989 massacre of student protesters, freedom of speech in China, or by regularly opposing China's hosting of the Olympics and pushing to link China's trade status with its human rights record.
Would improve there, democratization would take place, markets would be open to our products. But just really hasn't happened.
In 2022, she became the first speaker in 25 years to visit Taiwan, defying warnings from Beijing.
The world faces a choice between democracy and autocracy.
Pelosi's long career, however, was not without controversy. She had a contentious relationship with President Trump.
There are no votes in the House, a majority of votes, for a wall, no matter where you start.
If I needed the votes for the wall in the House, I would have them in one session, would be done.
Led to ultimately failed impeachments against him and created the House Select Committee on January 6.
To peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
President Trump on Thursday called Pelosi's retirement a great thing for America.
I think she was a tremendous liability for the country, who cost the country a lot in damages and in reputation. I thought she was terrible.
That's while former President Biden calls Pelosi the best Speaker of the House in American history, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says
her tenure has been iconic, legendary.
Meanwhile, echoing President Trump's comments that Pelosi's rapidly losing control of her party, House Speaker Mike Johnson says Pelosi's announcement shows
the old guard has been repudiated and the radicals are taking over the Democratic Party.
And now Pelosi's San Francisco-based House seat is opening up for the first time in decades. Among the current contenders are California State Senator Scott Wiener, who is openly gay and calls himself one of the nation's strongest advocates for LGBTQ rights, and Saikat Chakrabarty, a former chief of staff to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who calls himself an architect of the Green New Deal. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. A Rhode Island judge has ordered the Trump administration to fully fund food stamps for November. The ruling affects about 42 million Americans in the SNAP program. Judge John McConnell said people have gone without for too long. Vice President J.D. Vance called the decision, quote, absurd. The administration is appealing the ruling. And senators are expected to meet this afternoon for a 15th vote on reopening the government. Republicans made an offer to fully fund parts of the government while patching funds for the rest until January, plus a promised Obamacare vote. Until last evening, the deal looked promising to secure needed votes from Democrats, but now some key negotiators are casting doubt that a breakthrough is possible this week. Democratic leadership has not softened on their demands, and they want Republicans to sign off on a definitive deal to extend Obamacare subsidies. If senators don't see any hope for a deal coming to fruition, they could leave Washington for the next week. And following Supreme Court arguments on his sweeping global tariffs, the president is calling the case the most important in U.S. history. Trump said his 100% tariff threat against Beijing was key in getting Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping to ease the rare earth export controls. He said if the Supreme Court does not rule in his favor, he'll need to come up with a new plan regarding his tariffs. Trump said such a ruling could be, quote, devastating, calling it life or death for the U.S. And President Trump hosts leaders from 5 Central Asian nations at the White House, announcing new trade as well as energy deals and welcoming Kazakhstan into the Abraham Accords with Israel. The move expands the Middle East peace framework into the heart of Asia as Washington works to reduce U.S. dependence on China for its critical rare earth minerals. And President Trump is set to host the president of Syria, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, on Monday. Joining us now is Brandon Weichert. He's a geopolitical strategist and author of The Shadow War, Iran's Quest for Supremacy. Brandon, great to see you. I'm going to always remember you as the contrarian who came on this very show and correctly predicted Operation Midnight Hammer. That, of course, was the surprise strike on Iran's Fordow nuclear facility. And staying with predictions, Reuters is citing 6 anonymous sources that state the U.S. will establish a new military base in southern Syria. Syrian officials are denying it to Reuters. What are you hearing?
It's probably going to happen. This is why Trump is playing footsie with a guy like, well, he's called Al-Sharaa now, but I'll always remember him as Al-Jilani. And the reason I'll remember him that way is because he has the blood of many of our fellow Americans on his hands. He was an Al-Qaeda in Iraq commander. He killed many U.S. forces during the war. He was himself an ISIS-type prisoner at Camp Bucca that Obama released when we pulled out of Iraq, and he became a battlefield commander of Al-Qaeda in Syria. So he now calls himself Sharaa. They're giving him the Arafat treatment, where now the terrorist dons a suit, and now suddenly we're supposed to love this guy. But the reason that Trump is doing this is because he's trying to get a base, and he's trying to push the Russians, the old Ruskies. He's trying to push them out of Syria. In order to, solidify U.S. power in the region. Personally, though, I think this is a mistake. I think we should have droned Jelani a long time ago.
Politics indeed does make strange bedfellows. What are the risks of potentially working with him, do you think?
Well, right now he's not going to bite the hand that feeds him too hard. And to be clear, he is an asset of Turkey first. Israel has made peace with him, and they're working nominally because they want to have that air corridor open to their warplanes to fly over Syria and hit Iran at will. And we, of course, again, he's going to work with us because what's happening right now is there's a move by Turkey, Israel, and the U.S. to reshape energy and trade flows in the Eurasian Middle East corridor through Azerbaijan. It's called Zanjir Corridor. We're trying to move oil, natural gas, and trade resources away from Chinese-dominated Belt and Road trading regions into ones that are dominated by us. One of those exit points for the Zanjir Corridor goes out to Syria, and this is why Turkey's heavily involved, because they want natural gas flowing into Europe via Turkey, where they can charge money for that. So this is why we're working with Jelani. And of course, Jelani wants to be the big guy in Syria. So for now, he's going to play nice with us, but we cannot trust this man.
Considering the tenuous nature of that, what are we gaining and what are we potentially losing by working with Syria in this fashion?
Well, we're gaining the possibility of being able to basically keep the Middle East on our team, if you will, in the great competition with China and to a lesser degree with Russia. Of course, what we're losing is, you would say, a sense of justice. Again, Sharaa, but Jelani is what he was known as for years. Jelani killed scores of Americans. He is unrepentant about that. He's actually very proud of that. He used that as a calling card to help give him more credibility. He's currently slaughtering the Christians, the Alawites. He's threatening to slaughter the Kurds of Syria. He himself is a Sunni. He's a Sunni supremacist. So what we're losing is a sense of justice and a sense of dignity in Syria. But what we're gaining is the prospects that we will have a partner on the ground who will look the other way while we push trade and energy flows into Europe via Syria.
Yeah, certainly when you look at the justification for cozying up to the CCP 25 years ago, none of it came to fruition. Do you feel that there are similar risks here? Can you go a little deeper on those various factions and ethnicities within Syria?
Well, for starters, Jelani, like I said, is initiating an ethnic cleansing campaign against the Alawites, which was the group that the former leader of Syria, Assad, belonged to. He's initiating them against the Christians, against the Druze. The Israelis are backing the Druze, so the Druze are probably going to be okay right now. And then, of course, he's trying to kill the Kurds of eastern Syria, who we are aligned with. And so what that risks doing is destabilizing the country, because right now it seems like Jelani has a tenuous hold on power, and these other factions are obviously going to defend themselves. So you have the problem of instability in Syria still reigning. Then you have the issue of what's going to happen if he does kill all of these people. Are we just going to stand by and keep supporting him? How will that play out in the Congress in Washington, D.C.? I don't really know, but I can tell you right now that this is not a stable situation, and Jelani does not have a full grip on this, which is why also he's turning to Trump, because he's hoping the Americans can help him stabilize it. Also, we're trying to push the Russians out of their naval base in Syria, which they've had since the 70s, and we want to get our own base there. I, too, think that's a mistake, though, because I want us getting out of the Middle East and focusing on the Indo-Pacific and focusing on our own hemisphere. This does not help that situation. So the upside is we're switching energy flows possibly and trading flows, which would damage the CCP in the long run. The downside is it seems like we're going to be ensnared for much longer in this region, being led around by a head-chopping jihadist. So I'm not really, this is very disconcerting to me. And you're right, it could turn out like the deal with China, where we end up empowering the caliphate, and the caliphate is explicitly anti-American. So that is a very dangerous scenario.
Yeah, and if you look over at Afghanistan and all the attempts that many different countries, both Russian and American, tried there, it never quite worked out and ended up being, as you said, sort of a hotbed for training the caliphate-type fighters. But I want to understand your view on if Trump can sort of, through this meeting, sort of read him the riot act off camera and get him to fall in line for what is his long-term interests, or do you just feel like sort of, tiger doesn't change its stripes?
Tiger doesn't change its stripes, but ultimately the key thing here is Turkey, because more than anything, Jelani or Al-Sharaa and his group are a client of Turkey, and Turkey is making some major, massive moves right now in the region. I did hear a report that the current president, Erdogan of Turkey, has pancreatic cancer, which means there could be a major shift occurring in the Turkish leadership. But until that happens, it looks like Turkey is going to be a major player in the region, and Jelani is their pawn. So we're actually, more than anything, working with Turkey, because Trump has this weird affection with Erdogan to kind of take greater control over the region. But the long term could be that, this cat's going to bite the hand that feeds him eventually. This guy reminds me a lot of, like I said, Arafat. He reminds me of Castro in a way in the 60s. He also reminds me a bit of bin Laden. This guy is a very serious terrorist. He is Al-Qaeda. He's Al-Nusra Front, which was Al-Qaeda. This is a very, very dangerous guy. And on the 25th anniversary of 9/11 coming up next year, we're going to have a jihadist we're partnered with against China and Russia. It's very odd. It's a very odd thing.
Yeah, and while we're talking about dangerous terrorists, what are you seeing with Hamas? Are they ready to lay down their arms? Should we see Gaza start going into the next phase? It feels like no news has come out in the last week. What's developing?
Well, there have been a smattering of breaches of the ceasefire. I don't call it a peace treaty because it's not. It's a ceasefire. But so far at the larger level, it has held together. There have been, like I said, some incidents, but it does seem like the Hamas group needs or wants to do a deal. In fact, I heard about a week ago that the leadership in Hamas was telling Trump that if he got involved directly as an intermediary, they would be willing to disarm their long-range weapons, the weapons they use to shoot into Israel. And this is because, look, the Israelis they subjected Hamas to a lot of damage, but also Iran has been cut off from funding Hamas the way they used to. That was Hamas's lifeline. The Russians aren't going to backfill that. The Chinese certainly aren't. So Hamas is now isolated, and they're looking for a way to turn defeat into victory. And I think they're looking to take the Sinn Féin route in Ireland. They're looking to take a more political route. And so they are willing to disarm, which is great. And I hope that we're able to get them to do that.
And Brandon, just in our last 30 seconds as we finish up, to kind of come full circle, Syria, Hungary, Turkey, all sort of ways to get to Russia, but Russia reportedly sent a big cargo plane to Iran. What's happening?
Yeah, Russia is plying Iran and Venezuela as well with a lot of heavy weapons to deter us. But more than anything, this is a signal they're sending. They're willing to trade Iran and or Venezuela for Ukraine. The problem is nobody in D.C. is listening. They're freaking out. This is a play. They're playing us. They're saying, hey, we're going to keep doing this to you guys until you get out of Ukraine. All we have to do is end the Ukraine war, and this stops with Iran and Venezuela. I don't think anybody's listening in D.C., though.
It's more than a chessboard. It's sort of, it's a three-dimensional situation. It's a sphere that we're dealing with. Always appreciate your analysis. The Oracle, I'll call you, Brandon Weichert. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And coming up, California's public universities now require students to pass an online test affirming transgender definitions of harassment, or they risk being blocked from registration. NTD hears from a constitutional attorney on the topic.
California's harassment prevention laws are now being used by state universities to compel students to affirm transgender ideology. In some more sobering news, or they may risk losing access to their education.
That's right. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with a constitutional attorney, Erin Mercino, about this controversy. Have a look at that.
Under new state mandates, students must complete an online sexual harassment and anti-discrimination course that broadens the definition of harassment. The University of California's version, known as SHAPE, for Sexual Harassment, Anti-Discrimination Prevention and Education, defines refusing to use transgender pronouns or objecting to males in women's restrooms as creating a hostile environment. Students must answer quiz questions consistent with those views. Those who fail cannot register for classes the next semester.
And so it makes a person who believes in following, biology and the biological distinctions between a man and a woman, it puts them in the position where they're being accused of sexual harassment per this training.
Chief of Supreme Court Litigation Erin Mercino says there's strong Supreme Court precedent dating back to the 1940s that makes this kind of compelled speech unconstitutional.
West Virginia versus Barnett is really the quintessential case on compelled speech. And in that case, students were being required to stand up and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and it was against their beliefs. And the Supreme Court said that students cannot be required to stand up and engage in compelled speech that is different than what they believe.
At the heart of the issue, Mercino says, is that the state cannot decide what ideology people are allowed to hold.
This ideology is correct. This one is harassment. This one is violence. When what we're talking about are beliefs, political beliefs and religious beliefs. And here, the state of California is requiring through its SHAPE training compelled speech.
Mercino says university campuses should be a beacon of academic freedom.
But here it seems like they're just telling students what they must believe instead of giving any sort of dialogue to the different political beliefs or religious beliefs that are truly in place here.
Mercino says many professors who disagree stay quiet to protect their jobs. The attorney says there is a clear line between promoting inclusion and infringing on free speech.
So I think the line is when they require people to adopt a certain ideology in terms of gender identity, and requiring people to adopt certain political beliefs and religious beliefs and to state something that is against their own beliefs. So that's really at the heart of compelled speech, is when the government forces you to say something that you don't believe yourself.
Mercino says the weight of freedoms is on everyone's shoulders, and it's increasingly falling on the shoulders of young people. In the SHAPE training, one required question reads, "My name is Mona and I am transgender. Jane continues to call me James and objects to me using the women's restroom. What type of prohibited conduct can this be?" The only accepted answer, hostile environment. SHAPE was developed in response to AB 2608, a 2024 law requiring all students to undergo updated sexual harassment and discrimination training based on broader definitions. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And longevity and good health is what we're talking about next, especially as we head into the holiday season. Because real wellness doesn't come from detoxing in January. Our next guest says setting yourself up for success this holiday season starts here and now this November. Dr. Vaughn Watts is a functional medicine doctor and the author of a new book called Foundational Wellness, the simple system that ends doctor dependency forever. Dr. Watts, welcome. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Certainly. Now, the holiday season often comes with a few excesses where we break our usual food and lifestyle choices, and it can leave you feeling kind of out of sorts. But you say that it isn't the food or the parties. It's actually the stress that gets to us most. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, the stress is really the biggest thing that can affect some of our issues we have in the wintertime, in the holiday months. You know, under pressure, our digestive enzymes production drops, our digestive flow slows, our gut lining becomes more permeable. So all these things cause a lot of issues like bloating, food reactivity, and inflammation. So chronic stress can feed the wrong microbiome and cause all sorts of gut issues, which can cause all sorts of other symptoms and problems.
Mind and body all tied in together, but I know you've been looking at this in quite a lot of depth. What do you find really works to lower that stress?
Well, one of the best things that you can do with lowering stress is the number one thing I tell people to start with is getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. When you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you wake up more restful, you don't crash in the afternoon. And with that as well, your body's able to re-energize because you do a lot of your healing. It helps to reduce inflammation. It helps to balance our cortisol levels, which all of those things can be affected by stress. And stress really, if we're really stressed out, it'll make those cortisol levels spike, which then leads to many other problems.
Speaking of being, having odd sleep rhythms, especially it's prevalent when you're out of your natural rhythm, as with seasonal parties or on vacation. And at that time, cravings can take hold. So how can people guard against those cravings that might come up?
Well, and it comes back to stress, because at the end of the day, this holiday season, it's hard to be perfect. There's a lot of good food out there, and a lot of that food is filled with things that we probably wouldn't eat on a normal basis, a lot of sugar, a lot of carbs. So really, like I said, you really want to try to balance those cortisol levels, keep those blood sugar levels in check. And the first thing, and it's a simple thing, is one, is getting the good sleep. And then two, when you wake up first thing in the morning, there's a couple little tips you can do, like drinking some water with a little bit of lemon in it, get some fat or protein within the first hour of waking, and get moving a little bit. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and work out. I'm just talking move, walk a little bit, get that lymphatic system flowing. So the whole body starts flowing early at the beginning of the day so that you're setting up success for the whole rest of the day.
Sounds great. So practical, and so sounds like really items that people can implement tomorrow. So for people who are hosting parties, say, or even if you're choosing items from a smorgasbord at a party, or just cooking for yourself, what food choices can help people stay feeling well even after they have a huge meal, say?
Yeah, so first of all, I always go with whole foods, right? Make sure you're eating real food, stay away from ultra-processed foods, stuff that comes out of a package, bottle, or can. And then when you're choosing the foods, reach for the fat, the protein, and the vegetables. If you kind of make that a good portion of your plate, and say half or more of your plate, and then a little scoop of something sugary or dessert, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Your body's going to get the fuel it needs to be able to process some of the garbage that we're going to be eating throughout the holiday season much easier.
Quite a array of options there. It doesn't sound like too much discipline required if you really think about it. But I know you were formerly a military intelligence officer, and your approach has been described as having military precision now when it comes to your approach to health. But it also seems quite intuitive to me. I wonder your take on that.
Yeah, I try to, when I look at the body, and then, my background in military, I worked for the NSA as a young Marine many moons ago. And, when you're, as a cryptographer, you look at patterns, you look at these patterns are going to help you to break and crack certain codes. It's the same thing with the body. The body is not just one organ, just one little system. The whole body works as an entire system. So understanding how the entire body works, and it really isn't that complicated. Give it the right fuel and the body will function the way it needs to. And the fuel is good fats, proteins, and vitamins and minerals. And you get most of that from good, healthy meat choices and vegetables and fruits. And if you can, like I said, if you can load up on the majority of that, your body can handle the stuff that's not maybe the best, because you're more like 80-20, 80 good and 20, not so good. Your body can process that, and the liver can process that well.
And just in the last 30 seconds, Doctor, your book, Foundational Wellness, has been described as both a warning and a roadmap. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so what it does is it takes health and it really teaches it in a very simple way. In my philosophy and my belief is that most all disease is caused by one thing, and that's organ dysfunction. And the human body is made to heal itself when our organs are functioning the way they're designed to. And when they stop functioning and they start dysfunctioning, dysfunction leads to inflammation, and then inflammation leads to chronic inflammation, which eventually leads to disease. And the two main things that cause organ dysfunction is nutritional deficiency. You're not getting enough of the essential vitamins and minerals and nutrients, or toxicity. And we live in a very toxic world now, exposed to all sorts of things from heavy metals to molds to environmental toxins like pesticides. And so it's just important to, when you understand that, it makes nutrition or even health very simple. Make sure I eat the right things, make sure I'm getting the good nutrients, and then doing a periodic detox once a year, ensuring that, hey, you know what, we're exposed to this stuff, especially in the first world, we're very exposed to this stuff. And it doesn't matter how healthy you eat, you're still exposed to it. So getting on a good detox routine, like once a year, kind of spring cleaning of the body, can really help to keep the body in good shape.
And all that can start in January, but actually can start right now. I'm sure many people are inspired by your approach and hearing you speak today. Your book is out and available now, Foundational Wellness. Thank you so much, Dr. Von Watts.
Thank you.
All right, well, coming up, a tiebreaker for an election in Nevada was decided with a deck of cards after the candidates' race came up as a tie. We'll have that for you and much more coming up.